right now, the AI that we're developing and deploying is not Skynet. It's not general artificial intelligence that can take over and replace humans. It's narrow, specific applications of AI that is often in production really going to be used to support humans, to assist humans, to help humans be more effective, but won't replace humans. So we're going to have that human check on the AI.
Hello and welcome to Coffee with Mr. IoT. My name is Robert Schmidt. I'm Deloitte's Chief Futurist and also known as Mr. IoT. And today, welcome. My guest is Natana Sharma, the General Counsel for Labelbox. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Really well. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
What brings you? We are here at Singularity University, the summit. What brings you here?
So I gave a talk today on AI, hope, hype, and reality. So my talk was really focused on how do you actually build and deploy an artificial intelligence algorithm in production? What does that mean? How does that work? What's the cutting edge of how enterprise is doing that today?
I have to admit that for a general counsel to talk about so much depth, that's amazing. How did you get into this? What's your path to that?
Got it. So I actually have a background in math and science, and I've worn a number of different hats, and I actually went to law school. I did my JD MBA at Yale, really focused on the intersection of law, business, and technology. Mm-hmm. And so at Labelbox, I actually also have a business role, but I'm really focused on helping us to grow our business right at that heart of production machine learning. And so it's really exciting for me to be at Labelbox because we're working with companies across industries, from insurance to medical technology to biotech to geospatial imagery to retail. I'm really right at the heart of production machine learning. And so that's super fun for me, just as a person and a technologist, to get to see what's happening at the cutting edge of AI across industry.
So what's Labelbox? We've talked about it a few times now, so tell us, what is Labelbox? What do you do?
Sure. So Labelbox is a software as a service platform that enterprises can use to manage, annotate, and work with data to feed machine learning algorithms. So if we step back and we think about what's required to take code and to deploy code in production, software code, you need tools like GitHub, Jira, Atlassian. There's all kinds of tools that help software engineers to manage and deploy code. And when it comes to data science or machine learning, we're building the GitHub of data science or machine learning, but the key input for data science and machine learning for industry in production is data. Proprietary data that is annotated or labeled in proprietary ways. And so our infrastructure allows you to do that.
Interesting. So it's really, if I think of this, it's instead of deploying code, you deploy data with your tool. Is that sort of how I can simplify that?
Yes. And the thing is that with code is the end product. You run code. But with machine learning, your end product is model. But to get the model to do what you need it to do, you need the proprietary data. So the models themselves are basically commodities at this point. They're incredibly powerful, fluid, valuable models that Google gives everyone for free. But those models are only going to help you, a particular enterprise, if you've trained the model on your data.
So I think for many people today, AI or artificial intelligence is still kind of sort of like a very cryptic thing. Some people call it a black box. Do you have a great example that you've seen in your work to really bring AI to life, to really kind of like explain it to people?
Sure. So I think to start out, many of us have the experience of using Facebook or Instagram, and we notice that when we upload our photos, they get auto-tagged. Mm-hmm. And that's because Facebook and Instagram are using very powerful machine learning facial recognition algorithms, and we've all been tagging or labeling the data for Facebook for years. And so I think then the question is, well, how does this work, right? How have these algorithms gotten so good? And in Facebook's case, there's billions and billions and billions of pieces of data that have been tagged by all of us as we've used Facebook throughout the years, making that algorithm powerful. When it comes to machine learning or AI, I think there's a lot of different things that can end up falling into that category, and there's a lot of sci-fi and a lot of things that confuse people. But when it does come to the cutting edge technique of AI today that's used in industry, I'd call that deep learning. And so deep learning is a particular technique in AI that relies on neural networks with many layers. And it is a black box in the sense that when you can feed in some inputs and you get out outputs, and we don't fully understand everything in the process of how the deep learning neural network actually gets from the inputs to the outputs. What we know is the more data we throw in and the better labeled that data, the better outputs we're going to get as we use new data in the model.
So how do you combine ethics and values with machine learning, and particularly with deep learning, where a lot of the stuff that goes on is actually not us teaching it anymore? Machine learning is much more algorithm based, right? Neural networks sort of find their own way by giving it data. How do you include ethics and values in this whole process?
So I think that machine learning, like any other kind of technology, is a tool. And so we're going to have to make choices in our human society about when and how we use machine learning and what are the constraints we put on machine learning. Two pieces to say immediately to that. One is, right now, the AI that we're developing and deploying is not Skynet. It's not general artificial intelligence that can take over and replace humans. It's narrow, specific applications of AI that is often in production really going to be used to support humans, to assist humans, to help humans be more effective, but won't replace humans. So we're going to have that human check on the AI. And then I also think when it comes to AI algorithms, our algorithms, our AI is a reflection of us, and we are humans, we are biased, but now we have that mirror of us that we can probe and test mathematically. And if we find that an algorithm is biased in a way that we don't like, we can feed it additional data to support the algorithm to have a more open mind.
Doesn't that defeat the purpose? I mean, isn't bias per se something that might actually be a bias that's actually not based on facts, but just based on non-facts? And then if I give it facts, I actually get a different result. Just because I don't like it, that doesn't mean the result is bad?
So I think, let's take this to an example, because we're speaking very
Sure.
abstractly. But if you think about self-driving cars, it's important that self-driving cars don't hit people on the road. And researchers have found a few months ago that some key self-driving car algorithms are more likely to fail to recognize a pedestrian if that pedestrian has dark skin. So the self-driving cars are better at seeing light-skinned people. That's not a result that I think we want as a society. We want self-driving cars to be good at recognizing all humans on the street, regardless of their skin color. So if we know the algorithm is better at recognizing lighter-skinned people, then we can feed additional data into the algorithm to help to make it better at recognizing everyone. And so that would be an example where I think we'd really want to move away from bias. Now, again, we're human. We see the world from a limited lens, and there may be certain kinds of bias that is okay. Maybe, for example, what music you like or taste. So that's going to be its own set of ethical questions we'll have to address as a society. What kinds of bias and leaning towards one way rather than another are we okay with, and which kinds do we want to try to correct by feeding the machines additional data?
I find this fascinating because so much of this is so much about, there's such a, we call it ethics, but there's almost psychology, philosophy in there, and it's sometimes a little political and so forth. Let me ask you one more aspect of this with your role as general counsel. How does that play in when you deal with technologists in your company, and sort of like, you say you wear a business hat too, but if you put your legal hat on, how does that play into this?
So I think, I think there's different dimensions. One is, hey, what are the day-to-day running of a company? And then there's also questions about stepping back and reflecting. I think it's when we step back and we reflect on what are our laws and what should they be, that's something that doesn't necessarily get addressed in the day-to-day operations of running a company, regardless of one's role. But it is something that I personally do think about, because I think that especially when it comes to AI, we have a challenge in that we have a global arms race for the production of AI, both narrow AI and also whoever is the first that will create general AI, an AI that can do many things. That's an incredibly powerful advantage for one country, one organization, one entity to have. And so I think that when it comes to regulating AI, there's a real challenge. On the one hand, you want to protect privacy. And on the other hand, you're operating in a world where there is this arms race for AI, and some countries are not choosing to protect privacy in that same way. And so I do think it's a real challenge for folks to accommodate new privacy rules like GDPR, especially the smaller companies. And that means that it's going to be harder for places with very strong privacy rules to implement production-grade AI than places where there may be less stringent rules.
So does that actually impact how you put your development operations too?
With our company, we're really, really focused on being compliant with regulation, and we're an enterprise SaaS company, so we're really providing that infrastructure layer for our customers. But even for us, it's still really important that we have policies that protect our customer data and that are compliant with the use of customer information. And so, we're really careful about that.
We're here at Singularity University. Tell me a little bit about the people you've met that you're really excited about. What have you learned here? What have you seen? Just give us a little bit of I'd love to sort of get a bit of a look into for people who aren't here. Share some of the stuff that goes on here that you've seen.
Sure. So Ray Kurzweil, who's an incredible thinker in AI, was here today speaking about
Did you meet with him?
I did get to see him because we were in the green room at the same time, the speaker room at the same time, which was very cool. And he was speaking about his predictions for the future around machine-brain interfaces. And he is incredibly optimistic about the timeline for how quickly human brains will be connected up with the cloud and cloud computing. And I find that really fascinating, because if our neocortexes are connected to each other and to the cloud, I think it'll really change what it means to be human. And it's really exciting and also a little scary. So, wow.
What part is scary for you?
I think
just you, not particular for the company.
Sure. I think for me, what's scary is the notion of life as I know it radically changing. I think there's this notion of phenomenology, which is the experience of what it's like to feel something. And so what it's like to be a human, what it's like to be inside your own head will change if our heads are wired together into the cloud.
Sounds very Borg.
Exactly. So it's scary. That's what's scary to me. Kathy Wood, who's the founder and CEO of ARK Invest, is here, and an incredible thinker. And ARK publishes really great free research that it makes available to the world on exponential technology. And ARK Invest is a fund that's really focused on investing in exponential technology in the public markets. And Kathy is incredibly brilliant, also very optimistic. She says, look, there's going to be maybe $50 trillion of newly created value in the next 10 years due to exponential technologies, and has theories on where that value is coming from and where it's going. And Elon Musk follows her on Twitter, so he follows maybe 70 people. He follows Kathy. So I think Kathy's incredible. So it was amazing to have her here at the conference. So I think it's really this opportunity to meet with people who are thinking really deeply and in very interesting, contrarian ways about the future.
Ray Kurzweil talked about how he's been doing artificial intelligence for 55 years, and really only the last 18 months he could be doing what he wanted to do. If you'd had to think about things that you'd like to switch on or off today to help you with your efforts around AI, what would that be?
I think that last 18 months number is really interesting, because the company that I work with is just about 18 months old. And I think the thing that's challenging for us is that we're really at that heart of companies putting into place AI programs, and there's we're just at the cusp of companies realizing that they can do this. And I think that oftentimes folks realize the need for infrastructure like ours after they've had some pain and they've tried really hard to make it work without the infrastructure. And so I think that I'd love for, I think in the next 6 months we'll have many people have tried and then realize that they need our tool. And so I think that's really interesting. And how do you figure out, as this market is so early and young and people trying to do this are so early and young, how do you really productionize AI? And I think there's a great analogy to what took place in the 90s where anyone with a website was valued really highly. And now people say that they're using AI when they're not actually using AI, and it's this buzzword and it's hyped, but we're also getting to a place where the computational power is there and the data's there and the models are there, and we really can, as Ray said, put into production AI capabilities that just would not have been possible before. Because even with the knowledge, maybe you didn't have the computational power, you didn't have the data. And so I think it's an incredibly exciting time. I guess the other thing that I'd wave a magic wand is make people realize that it really is possible to build AI now, and that it's not that expensive, and that the sooner you start experiments and trying, the better. Because when you start those experiments and you try, you're developing the capability to deploy AI at a greater rate.
What a great experiments you've seen. You talk about those experiments. Do you have one or two experiments that are really sort of like worth sharing?
So, on our blog, our labelbox.com/blog, we've got case studies from a number of our customers who are doing super cool things with AI, and in industries from insurance to media. And so I definitely recommend checking out the blog.
No particular one? You don't want to have a favorite child?
The ability of AI to recognize faces is pretty incredible. And it's not just human faces that can be recognized. So we've got, there are folks who are working on recognizing individual cows, or people are working on recognizing, it's amazing what AI can learn to distinguish. And so I think that is really fascinating, where we can use AI on tasks that are actually really difficult for a human.
Yeah, it's fascinating. In my work, I work a lot in factories and make factories smart. And one of the things I've seen is that now we can do more and more with video and sort of like use the visual cues that we couldn't use before. And it's fascinating, all the stuff we can actually get from that. And there's stuff that we might actually not even consciously see that a camera actually can catch and deal with it. So
exactly.
I get that. It's very fascinating.
And it's pretty incredible, I think. We have a number of customers who are working on various kinds of smart machinery and smart equipment in manufacturing and in farming and agriculture. And it's incredible to me that that's possible, and that it really is possible. It feels like it should be science fiction, but it is happening.
Yeah, agriculture is one of those things where I wish we do more and more. I spend a lot of time in factories and so forth, and I'd love we spend as much time in agriculture. I know people are, but it's just such a fascinating area where I think we're going to see a lot of changes happening in this way. So I have a closing question for you, which is really around what can we do, what can I do, what can we do in terms of sort of like you talked about getting people to try, getting people to start. What are the things that we can do to really help people make that leap of whatever it is? I don't know if it's a leap of faith or if it's a leap of trust or whatever, to try out AI and really use it.
So I think the first step is to find a very narrow problem with high ROI in your business. And when you take that very narrow problem with high ROI, you can think about constructing a POC to apply AI to it. So you find that narrow problem with high ROI, and then you find lots of examples of data connected to that problem. So if it was a factory example, it might be, a problem might be, hey, can we find the defective objects that we make in our factory earlier? Can we catch that earlier? Is there a way that we can fix them earlier? And then you could start training your model using that data to recognize the defects. And then you would be able to test your model, test new data, test your model with new data, and then feed those results to humans who'd fix the results coming from the model. You feed that back into the model, and you get this iterative process where you start getting a model that works pretty well. a bunch of the time. And then you figure out, well, how do I incorporate the results from that model in my workflow with humans so that we can make everything work better?
That's awesome. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. It was great talking about AI, Labelbox, and all the good things around this. And with that, our show is coming to an end. Thank you for watching. If you missed part of this show, any past shows, please check out the playlist. And don't forget to subscribe, push the button. Bye.